Ever find yourself wondering what makes certain people learn so differently, so effortlessly?
Today we're taking a deep dive into that very question, giftedness.
We'll be exploring a research paper titled Global Insights in Giftedness Research, Mapping Current Characteristics and Challenges.
Sounds kind of academic, right?
But stick with us. This paper is full of surprising findings that really changed how I view this whole topic.
But before we dive into all that, let's talk about the term giftedness itself.
I mean, it's been a source of debate for years, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Is it just about, like, having a super high IQ?
Right.
Or is it something more?
Well, you've hit on a debate that's fascinated researchers for a long time. Like back in the early days, you had folks like Terman, who basically said, hit that 140 IQ mark, boom, you're gifted. So basically, you're sitting down for one of those standardized tests back in the 1900s.
Palms are sweating, and that score, according to Terman, would basically decide if you were labeled gifted or not.
It was all about that single number back then.
Intense.
Exactly. But then came along this researcher named Marland, really shook things up.
Wow.
He argued that giftedness wasn't just about being like a math whiz.
It was about this exceptional potential in any area, could be painting, leadership, even coming up with amazing inventions.
It's like, imagine that same scenario, you're taking a test, but this time it's not just about the numbers.
It's about showing your creativity, your leadership, really letting your own unique abilities come through.
That's Marland's big idea right there.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder,
What if we'd viewed giftedness through that lens all along? What talents might we have missed?
it's a fascinating question.
It is.
And this debate about what shapes giftedness, well, it still goes on today.
Right.
Is it the genes you're born with, the environment you grow up in, or some kind of fascinating mix of both?
Right.
This is where the research paper we're looking at gets really interesting.
Okay, so let's get into it. What did this research find about the minds of gifted individuals? What sets them apart?
Well, it seems giftedness isn't just about being like a whiz kid acing every test. This research found something really interesting. Gifted individuals, they often show this heightened emotional sensitivity along with their intellectual abilities.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not just that they think faster, it's like they're feeling everything much more deeply.
So it's like all their senses are like turned up to 11, not just intellectually, but emotionally as well.
Exactly, that's a great way to put it. This paper, it highlights this really fascinating link between cognitive ability and emotional depth. So these individuals might be incredibly moved by injustice, captivated by beauty, even deeply affected by, the emotions of people around them, and all of that, like, to a much greater degree than their peers.
Wow, that really makes you think about those, like, classic gifted stereotypes, doesn't it?
It's not about fitting that robotic genius cliche at all, is it? It's really about this complex connection between the heart and the mind.
I think that's a really important point.
Okay, but let's get practical for a moment. If giftedness is this like nuanced mix of traits we've been talking about, how do we even start to identify it?
That's where things get really tricky. One of the things this research paper really emphasizes is that there isn't a single test, no magic formula to definitively say, yep, that's giftedness.
Right. There's no giftedness detector we can just pull out.
Not quite. And this is where the people around the child, especially educators and parents, that become so crucial.
Because they're the ones who see these kids every day, right?
Exactly.
Seeing that constant curiosity, how quickly they pick up complex ideas.
And that spark,
Yeah.
when they just make connections that other people miss.
It's like they're putting together this like complex puzzle and they're looking for those really subtle clues.
Exactly. And this is where the research, unfortunately, uncovers a big problem. A major lack of awareness and, honestly, training, even among very experienced educators.
So even teachers who are really good at their jobs might not recognize these signs.
They might misinterpret certain behaviors or just miss those signs completely.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been given the right tools or understanding.
It's like having a rare plant, right? It needs specific care to thrive. You can't just water it with the usual stuff.
That's a perfect analogy. And unfortunately, this lack of awareness can have a real lasting impact. Imagine, being that gifted child who feels completely misunderstood, whose talents aren't nurtured, who maybe even struggles to connect with their peers because their interests just seem different.
It's heartbreaking to think about that kind of potential going untapped.
It really is.
And it makes you wonder, what happens to these kids as they get older? What about the long-term impact of these challenges?
That's such a crucial question. And it brings us to a significant limitation of a lot of the research in this field.
So there's like this gap in the research then. What's missing?
Well, a big one is the lack of long-term studies. We have all these like snapshots of giftedness in children.
Right.
But what happens is those kids become teenagers, adults.
Yeah, yeah.
How do their experiences and even the challenges they face, how do those change over time?
It's like we're comparing a single photograph to a whole movie, isn't it? We're missing the whole story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need more research that follows these individuals over years, maybe even decades, to really see how giftedness plays out over a lifetime.
And to see how that support or lack of support makes a difference in the long run.
Absolutely.
And, we can't talk about the limits of research without talking about representation, can we?
Right, right.
It feels like most research still focuses on a certain type of person,
It does, doesn't it?
usually white, middle class.
Often, yeah.
So we're missing a huge part of the picture, aren't we? I mean, what about the experiences of gifted people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different walks of life?
It makes you wonder what we're missing, what we're overlooking.
Exactly. What talents, what perspectives are we missing just because, I don't know, maybe we haven't broadened our idea of what giftedness even looks like?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
It really is.
Because if giftedness really is this diverse, multifaceted thing,
Right.
well, then our understanding of human potential, of what people are capable of, it's just incomplete.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface.
I think so.
So, as we wrap up our deep dives into this amazing topic, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that giftedness is way more nuanced and complex than those old stereotypes we all know.
It's not just about having a high IQ or being a child prodigy.
Right. It's about this really unique mix of cognitive, emotional, and social strengths. And those strengths, they can show up in so many ways.
Absolutely. So let's be sure to really look for that kid who stays up late reading.
The one asking questions that make everyone else stop and think.
The one who pours their heart into their art, their music, whatever their passion is.
Those are signs of extraordinary potential.
They really are. And maybe it's time we start looking for those flashes of brilliance in unexpected places, to embrace a more open view of giftedness.
One that celebrates the full range of human potential.
Exactly, because who knows what amazing talents we might uncover. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of giftedness. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.